So everybody, welcome and good afternoon. Good afternoon for everyone in Brazil. And good evening to Raphaël, to everyone in Switzerland. I welcome you all to this last moment of our seminar in questions on poetics and style of seriality. It's a very special moment. It's a closing moment and a very, very special moment for us because we have the visit of a very, very dear friend, colleague, and partner of my personal pathways in the explorations of narrative and visual culture and comics and all things that are common to our interest, who is Raphaël Baroni, who will close our activities, talking to us about themes correlated to lots of issues that we have discussed during this semester. I'd like to, as I showed you in the poster in the beginning, Baroni will talk to us about, just a moment, about paratextuality, narrative, hierarchies, and plot in transmedia narratology. I'd like to present Baroni, although for most of us, he is already known. We're very familiar with his work, but anyway, I'd like to make a rather quick presentation of his profile. Raphaël Baroni is associate professor at the Department of French as a foreign language at the University of Lausanne. He's mainly interested in the analysis of narrative time, plot, tellability, and narrative sequence in relation with narrative interest and transmedial analysis, which is a particular reason of our connection during these years. He is the author of La tension narrative, narrative tension, which was published by Seuil in Paris, 2007, in the collection created by Gérard Janet, Poétique, and as summarized by Emma Kafalanus in the review that she made about La tension narrative in the journal Poetics today. According to her, Baroni emphasizes that the source of narrative tension is the combination of uncertainty and anticipation, the perceiver's experience of simultaneously not knowing something and wanting to know it, which is basically the definition of plot in a way. The uncertainty may be in regard to something that has already happened, in which case the anticipation is a form of curiosity. Or the uncertainty may be in regard to something that has not yet happened, in which case the anticipation is a form of suspense. It's the end of quotation. Baroni is also the author in the same collection of L'œuvre du temps, the workings of time, and is the co-editor of narrative with Françoise Reva, is the co-editor of narrative sequence in contemporary narratology. He is a member of the advisory board of Le Carrier de Narratologie, and in 2010, he has founded the Réseau des Narratologues Francophones, the network of Francophones narratologists. He is also the author of two books, the two most recent books by Baroni is one in 2017, Les rouages de l'intrigue, the engines of the plot, and also with Klaus Junti he organized in 2020 Introduction à l'étude des cultures numériques, la transition numérique des médias. Introduction to the study of digital cultures, the digital transitions of media. He also is a member, and it's particularly dear to me, he is also a member of the research group in comics, le groupe de recherche sur la bande dessinée at the University of Lausanne. And so with these words, I leave you with, I ask you to, during this transmission, if you could, keep your video turned on. So I don't know if it's the case with Raphaël, but there are several of the ones that talked during these seminars. They demanded me that the people watching it keep their video on, because sometimes it's a little unnerving and a little distressing to talk, having the impression that no one is watching you. So if you could leave your video on, I can turn in this way, so everybody is watching everybody, even with the poster here of the presentation by Baroni. So we came here to hear you, Raphaël, so we are all ears for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benjamin. I'm very happy to be with you today. Don't worry if you find this presentation very ugly. I hope you can see it, but I tried to put the most absurd colors to give some pop feeling to my presentation, you know. So especially with the blue of the corporate design of our university and this kind of weird color, it's really, I think it looks weird, whatever. I have to apologize for those who read French and who may have read already some arguments that I will present here are not completely original. I mean, I've been working on those issues for a while, and for me, it took me a while to find out what I could say that would be more or less original about transmedia storytelling. The title is slightly different because I'm not going to talk about transmedia narratology, but really about like transmedia storytelling. So it's a little bit different, and it's going to be, I will have probably you all know what is transmedia storytelling, but I will have a quick reminder about this issue, this concept. Is quite rather new concept, and then I will try to find out a way to discuss it in hopefully in a new way. I mean, but it's not going to be completely new because, as I said, in this last book that I published last year, it's in French, so it's not for everybody, but there is a chapter in it where basically you will find the arguments that I present here. But also they are, before this chapter that I made, 3 chapters made by Henry Jenkins that I translated from his blog, because those texts where I found those texts very, very helpful, very useful, and most people, they don't know, but I mean, if you read English, go on his blog, and if you want to have a very quick presentation of what is transmedia storytelling, there's a kind of something that he gives to his students. It's a 10 points definition of what transmedia storytelling is, and it is a text that I have translated in French because I think that it's very helpful to enter in his thoughts about that. And I will have very slight criticism, but it's really more about like how I try to make my point in this thing. And one point, when you read Jenkins, the first thing you read is a plot and narrative tension. I mean, everything I've been working on for years and years. I mean, especially with my PhD now, Fortunately, I work on other issues, but they say, you know, in our modern world with transmedia storytelling, it's totally pointless. It's not relevant anymore because people, they don't tell plots. They are building story worlds, and basically plot is not a very important thing anymore. And it was a kind of reaction from my side to say, not so sure about that. So let's try to find out why plots might be still relevant in those transmedia storytelling worlds. Usually I make long comments on images that I use on the first image of my presentation, because it's not just to make it look nice. I mean, I didn't choose my images randomly. They are very well thought. First, maybe you identify some. I hear. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you see those two comic books that are related to Star Wars are very important comic books when you talk about transmedia storytelling. The first one on your left is a comic book that has a subtitle. So here I have to move the bars of Zoom to read it. At least beyond the movie, beyond the galaxy. And when you read this in this Marvel comic book, you understand that it is a moment when this sort of adaptation of the movie made in the comic book went to a point where the comic book would continue beyond the movie and tell stories that you will never see on a screen of a movie theater, because it was never a material for a movie. So basically, it's a moment when there is this disjunction between the narrative in the comic book and the narrative in the movies. And it's a moment when Star Wars becomes quite naturally a form of transmedia storytelling. The other one, Shadow of the Empire, I will come back very quickly. It's a comic book about, here you really recognize very well the actors of the series, and really it's in continuity with the Return of the Jedi. But this story, you will never see it on the screen. Yet they build everything around this story. You have even the movie soundtrack. You have all the material. You have novels and everything about this part of the story, Shadow of the Empire, except the movie. And it was very interesting because it was a way for George Lucas to prepare the continuation of with the new trilogy that would appear 2 years later. So basically, it shows what is the function of transmedia storytelling, why he decided to tell this story in comic books, in novels and stuff like that, because he wanted to prepare the field for the movie. Then we will discuss mostly about that. I mean, this problem, not about that franchise, because I'm not a specialist. I'm not a specialist of no franchise at all, actually. But just to see what is the status or the function of this comic book when compared to the movies, the official movies. And just on the right, it was a way to remind you that seriality is not a new thing. It's a very old thing. And I'm very well convinced that actually seriality is a natural way for storytelling. It has always been serialized throughout the years and over the years. But it was really a moment when we began to build stories by one author with a closed story. And there was this moment when it became the most prevalent cultural objects, and everybody would work on that because those are the objects that have a value. And the new thing with the TV series and franchise and everything now is the fact that we pay attention again to those serial narratives, because we understand that they have a cultural value, or at least a cultural significance, and we have to work on that. But basically, it's coming back to normal, and some of there are new things, and this might be discussed today, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So I will try to stick to my plan, and I have the material to talk for 2 hours probably, but I will try to skip a little bit, go faster, and maybe save time for the discussion. Just looking at the time, it's 6:30, so I'll try to talk around 40, 50 minutes, so we can have some time to discuss. And for me, it's late and I haven't eaten, so I will have to, at the moment, to say goodbye and go eat. So, well, this was the moment of advertisement to show you this book on the right is the one that I want you to buy if you read French, but don't worry about that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Henry Jenkins, and here is a French translation. So basically, wrong audience, I should have used the original one in English, but I want to talk back a little bit just to remind you, because maybe not everybody is completely used to the concept of transmedia storytelling, or some people may confuse it with different phenomena. So I just want to come back to the specific definition of transmedia storytelling, and you will see that what I will say is trying to challenge a little bit this definition. So here is a comment made by Éric Maigret, which is a very important author in France, who wrote a foreword to the French translation of the book from Henry Jenkins on convergent culture. And what he says that if you want to understand what transmedia storytelling truly is, you have to understand that it's not cross-media. And they say where cross-media would above all produce redundancy or dispersion according to the rather poor logic of byproducts, transmedia would be deployed as an immense soap opera whose narrative center would be everywhere and whose circumference would be nowhere. And basically, I agree with this definition, but our question will be this idea of a center that would be nowhere and this circumference that would be everywhere. Because if you really stick to this definition, then, well, you wouldn't pay too much attention to, for example, a concept such as paratextuality, narrative hierarchies. And I want to make a point about also the importance of some central narratives in transmedia storytelling, which actually revolve on the development of a plot and stuff like that. But what does it mean to say that? If we come back to Jenkins and to this very interesting text that you find on his blog, here you can check out. He says, for example, it takes the Matrix franchise and he says key bits of information are conveyed through 3 live action films, a series of animated shorts, 2 collections of comic book stories, and several video games. There is no single source or text where you can turn to gain all the information needed to comprehend the Matrix universe. And this is one of the definitions he gives to transmedia storytelling. And here, I already have a problem, because I'm almost sure that almost nobody listening to this conference have played to the video games of Matrix. For some reasons, also because it has a very bad reputation. It seems to be a very bad video game. So I don't advise you to try to find out a very old machine that could actually play this video game, but it has absolutely no interest. Also, the comic book stories. I would be very surprised to hear that any of you have heard about the comic books, or maybe you have heard but haven't read those comic books. I haven't read them. So when you say there is no single source, there is no source, and you need to have all those information to comprehend the Matrix universe, I don't agree with this definition. It's simply not true. I think that most of us have seen the 3 movies, maybe even just the first one, and on this basis, people know what is the Matrix universe and discuss about it and build a reflection on the interest of this story. So basically, I have a feeling that Matrix, for example, is a good example of very well, there is an attempt to build a complex story world, especially with animatrix that many people have seen, and you see that there are bits of information that gives you access to some things that you don't know or would like to know. But there is a very important thing. When you read the comic books or when you play the video game, most of the time you need to know the movies to understand what's the universe you are entering in. But actually, when you're watching the movies, you don't need the video games, or you don't need the comic books to understand the movies and to make sense of those movies. So basically, I think there are very clear hierarchies here, and maybe the notion of plot can help us to think about that. So here, for example, you see those images, and as I said, probably you know the image on the right, the image probably also animatrix. But again, the path of Neo in the video game for Atari, or the comic book on your left, probably most of you don't know. And I think that even animatrix is completely optional to understand the Matrix world. And I think that this gives me a feeling that maybe it doesn't work exactly how they say it. So you can always also discuss later on the difference between an ideal conceptualization of transmedia storytelling, and just say that no one has ever achieved a perfect transmedia storytelling form, or and it's perfectly acceptable, or you just understand that maybe those story world, they are built a little bit differently for some very obvious reason that I will discuss later. So here is these two objects also to try to discuss this issue. On the left, it's an example of cross media, because it's very, very plain adaptation, very, very close to the original made by, I think, Marvel. I don't see it because I have the bar of Zoom. It's very, very annoying. Yeah, Marvel. And then on the right, you see Dark Horse Comics. It's interesting. You changed the editor. And this element that is truly an element that gives a connection, but really most of the people ignore the existence of that. But it has a function. And it's very interesting because it has mostly a commercial function to prepare, to reactivate the activity of the fan base of the franchise. Because in order to have a success with a new trilogy of movies that would be about to begin a few years later, they needed to have this kind of reactivation of the activity of the interest for the world. They needed that because they knew that they would carry out the rest of the people to the movies to think, okay, it is relevant, it's actual, because many times has happened 10 years, more than 10 years, 15 years between the first trilogy and the second. So the problem is here to build a connection in time to revive the interest. So basically it's commercial issue, it's advertisement. And I think it's very important to have that in mind. Yeah, here just to show you how close to the movie the first adaptation was, and also is the author, George Lucas, is credited, and also the movies, it's almost credited as a movie. And here the idea of this new franchise that was adapted to prepare the new trilogy, whatever. Okay, I go a little bit further. But here you see those new strategies become very common now. One example, Planet of the Apes, everybody knows Planet of the Apes. Not everybody knows that it was originally a science fiction book by a French author, Pierre Boulle, whatever. There was an adaptation also by Marvel or Dark Horse Comics, I don't remember. That was very close to the movies. I received a donation from the library of the city of Lausanne. I have the entire story, so I'm very happy to have that. I wanted to show off a little bit of my archives here. But here, the new thing is on the right, and you see here, when you have a new novel, now they don't make adaptations. What they do is a prequel of a movie, because the commercial value of the novel is very low, and they don't have much interest in working on that, but maybe it's interesting for the editor or for the author. But the thing is, that's not for the franchise. The main function of this is to prepare the interest for the movie that you're about to see. And here it is defined as something that is made in preparation for something else. You see, because it's even on the cover of the book. It's a prequel of a movie that hasn't been out already. Okay, so you see here the function is also here. The most recent example I have found, and I found absolutely fascinating, Stranger Things. Okay, probably everybody has seen this excellent serial TV show. The thing is, we have a problem with Stranger Things. It's very late, a long time between two seasons. Okay, so it's hard to keep the interest in the series. And again, what they do, they make comic books now, and they make comic books, and it's very interesting. What are you going to tell in a story where there is two worlds, an upside down, I mean, a real world and the upside down? And well, you tell the story from the other side. So basically what they've done for the fan base to keep interest in the story world, retell the first season, but from the side of the guy that was lost in the upside down. And actually, that is very interesting because, well, it's entertaining, but seriously, I think that if you haven't seen the TV show, it is crap, because basically you understand nothing, and there is basically not a lot of interest, because the guy is alone in the dark all the time, and someone is chasing him. But basically, there's not a lot of things. I mean, it's a kind of but if you know the story and you find all these little clues that allows you to make connections with the main object, here it's interesting. And here again, I think that it is very obvious that there is a hierarchy between two media, two parts of the story world. And there is a source narrative on your right, and there is a derivative that is peripheral on the left. And here you see, again, we are a little bit out of the picture of the ideal form of transmedia storytelling. No, so as I said, why I wanted to come back on this issue, it was also because there is this saying now that is very common assumption that everybody agrees to say, okay, nowadays, we are in world-dominated narratives. We used to be in plot-dominated narratives, but it's not the case anymore. Now it's a world-dominated narrative, and Jenkins gives this example. He said he talks about a filmmaker and say that this filmmaker said, when I first started, you would pitch a story because a good story, without a good story, you didn't really have a film. Later, once sequels started to take off, you pitched a character because good character could support multiple stories. Think about Indiana Jones, for example. And I think the transition is at that moment. And now you pitch a world, because a world can support multiple characters and multiple stories across multiple media. And here, the idea behind this talk is to say, okay, so basically plot is not relevant anymore as an important issue for the audience, for the creation. I mean, I have to say that sometimes it is true, because many movies now are very boring because the plot is so thin that actually it's not that great, I think. But the thing is, I think it's probably wrong, and I will try to prove you why it is wrong by taking the most famous, lucrative franchise in the world, maybe after Marvel, but I would say Star Wars. I will show you how actually you can see that actually a plot is more important than the world, and actually the world, story world, is really dominated by issues concerning the plot. Okay. Just have a quick look at the, okay, the timing. Sorry, I switch in French. It's okay. So, story world across against plot here. Richard Saint-Gelais, an author that I like very much from Quebec, wrote in French in his excellent book Fiction Transfuge. I don't know if it has been translated in English. I hope it is. It was, Benjamin? No, I don't know. No, okay. It really should be a very important book. Fiction, it talks about transfictionality. Actually, he told me he was not very happy with the title of his book, that he didn't decide to give to his book. It was the editor who said Fiction Transfuge. It's about like transfictionality. It should have been the title of the book. And transfictionality, he says, is a phenomenon that concerns not only fiction, but also to a very large extent storytelling and plot. One could argue, however, that it plays the first against the second, or more precisely, that it is based on the assumption that fictional world overflows the plot that unfolds in it. And here again, I'm not completely sure that it is truly the case. I'm not completely sure that it's not sometimes the opposite, and I will try to prove it. I give you other example. Okay, it was made for a French audience. Here you see talking about like two recent books, one by a very important author, Anne Besson, and also Claire Cornillon, who wrote recently on seriality and transmediality. And you write in the title or subtitles infinity of contemporary fictions, and Anne Besson constellation, constellations, it's the same in English. And I would say that behind this idea about seriality and especially seriality, how it is developed in transmedia storytelling, so in fictions mostly since the 70s, I would say, or 60s, 70s, it would be the idea of this Big Bang. You have something that is at the origin of the story world, or original work, but after the origin, it bursts and it builds this story world that would be, as Maigret said, without periphery and without center. As today, it would be pointless to try to find the center of our universe, because it's not just where it began with the Big Bang, just something, you cannot reach the border of the of our universe. The universe is something that has, so this idea, this physical conceptualization of story worlds is very strong in the talks, in the representation we give to contemporary transfictionality, transmedia storytelling. And at the same time, I think that it's not so very close to what truly happens if you look at the history of franchise and the experience of users of a franchise. I think that it's a different thing, the two things. But I would say if you work this way, you will come to another model that I will present at the end. I'm not the author of this model. It's my very dear friend, also Marie-Laure Ryan, who talked about the snowball effects, a snowball project that would typically be illustrated by the most famous franchise like Matrix or Star Wars or Marvel, that works that way. Marvel is very complex, so I will try to speak as few as possible from this one. Well, blacks. Okay. So a few questions here. I'll try to make it clear. Is transmedia storytelling, you understand now, it's very redundant, but I wrote it, so I read it. Is transmedia storytelling a hierarchical entity with a center and a periphery? Make the hypothesis that maybe it is a case, contrary to what most people say. So can we consider that some elements are playing a role of a mere paratext? So I will come back to the notion of paratext if you're not familiar with it. And the other question, is plot less important than the story world in transmedia storytelling? I already said it several times. Question 3, I don't know why, okay, it doesn't work. It was 1.2, whatever. If the transmedia storytelling has a center, how can we describe it? How can we build hierarchies between dispersed elements of a transmedia story world? Is it easy to do it? I think in some cases it's extremely easy. I think in other cases it's very complicated. But I think the example I gave at the beginning with Matrix was a very easy case, for example. I think that there is absolutely no doubt that the movies are the core of the story world and that other elements are peripheral. And my hypothesis would be, is plot, maybe among other factors, probably could be a tool helping us to distinguish between central and peripheral narratives. So what is paratext? Probably you know this notion was invented by Gérard Genette, and this is the idea of paying attention. There was a great idea of Gérard Genette, his idea of transtextuality was to pay attention to all the elements that revolve around the text, because for a long time until he wrote this book, people were mostly concerned about the text, I mean the narrative or whatever would be considered as the object, and we paid not so much attention to the way the text was presented, was surrounded by other texts, by other elements that would help us to make sense of this text, because the text is never a bare, raw form of textuality. It is always surrounded, because if you don't have the context and if you don't have all those elements, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not going to talk about the experience Richard's made with these students, but I mean, this is the way it works. So he covers a lot of elements. He talked about footnotes. Recently, people are working on chapters, how you segment, how you make segmentations. The title is extremely important. It builds a horizon of expectations. The name of the author, if you choose to use a pseudo, this is going to make a completely different reading experience for the people, and so on and so forth. So in this classical model, I would say that people would agree that the text, and mostly we were talking about text that tell a story. So the narrative was at the center and the rest was peripheral and was not really telling a story. So basically, this wouldn't work as a model to work on transmedia storytelling, where each element would be a little narrative. Transmedia storytelling, in contrast, would be more like that, with this egg that would be the transmedia, the transfictional world or story world of transmedia storytelling. And here you see I make a big line, but actually it's supposed to be without borders and without center. But the truth is, some things are more peripheral. For example, fan fictions, people would hesitate to integrate those textual production to the transmedia storytelling, because it's not canonical, and most of the time it's very transgressive. Yet, you know that the industry pays a lot of attention to fan fiction. So basically, there is something they like it. Basically, transmedia storytelling is also a way to push people to build transfiction, because fan fiction will greatly help to keep this interest for a story world, even when the real producers stop producing things, you know, whatever. But you can put, and see, I put games on the border too, because there are a lot of even board games that are not very narratives in the true sense of the strict sense of the term, that basically are some extension of the transmedia storytelling. But yet there are things, objects that are more obvious, like plays, novels, films, TV series. I would forget plays if there was, before Harry Potter, but Harry Potter even played on the possibility to add a play in the world of Harry Potter. And it's very original addition to the world, I think, and helped a lot of teenagers to read plays, which they would never do it for fun, at least. So whatever. And well, it's completely different. You see two models, you think, okay, they have nothing in common. Yet, because paratextuality refers to a hierarchy between elements, and while transmedia storytelling, as you have seen, is playing on continuity and pretends that it has no center, no periphery, and paratextuality has multiple functions. Among them, the most obvious is advertisement, but it is an incitation to buy, read, hear, play, but it doesn't really tell a story, or it's a comment, or it's a... But transmedia storytelling is a coordinated narration. It tells rather than it sells. I was very happy with this phrase, so you will see it a second time in my presentation. So, yet I thought that I wouldn't switch to this directly, but whatever. Actually, I will question that, and I will give you some arguments. And one of the basic assumptions that I found in Marie-Laure Ryan's work was this idea. I'm sorry if I forgot to give you the reference. I can give it to you later or in the discussion if you want. It's a very interesting article where she says that she's, I like her very much. She's always a very critical mind, but always very generous, and she doesn't do it just to, you know, to be against. It's constructive, but she's like, okay, transmedia storytelling, is it just a brand, a new stuff, you know, or is it truly something new? And when you analyze the objects, you see that you see how it is supposed to be, like this top-down large. I mean, no, it would be down, bottom, whatever. Ah, okay, no, whatever. No, this is the idea. Transmedia storytelling is supposed to be organized by industry that would coordinate the entire thing. It's supposed to build a single world that would be homogeneous. And it is supposed, ideally, to have each media playing its specific role in the development of the story world. Each part of the plot is supposed to be equally important. We already seen that it's not really true. And to fully grasp the story, you would have to read it all. And she gives an example of that nobody has ever read. Alpha 07 is a very experimental work with 3 platforms. I think it's a video game, it's a movie, and it's a story, and it exists. Things that really work that way, it exists, but it is absolutely not the thing that people talk about. There are experimental works that interest nobody except for scholars. I mean, so basically, it's very interesting to think that you can build those kind of objects. It's totally possible. It's not going to be a very a billion dollars value franchise. It's just going to be experimental. But the truth is, those franchises that we talk about, they are completely different. She calls it snowball project. So basically, it's a bottom-up logic. So things aggregate to it in a more or less chaotic way. There are overlapping worlds, but it's not a single world. For example, there are many worlds that have their own logic, internal logic that doesn't fit with the rest. I mean, you can say whatever you want. When you have a Star Wars with a Lego character, it doesn't truly fit to the story world of Star Wars. Maybe the story is supposed to be, but I mean, this is a toy. I mean, this is not the same thing. And you see that the tone, the genre is completely different also. This is not the same kind of stories. And some narrative media provide the most important part of the plot. And I think it's quite obvious. And in the culture we live, probably there is a switch of interest from one major media to another, but yet there are some media that are obviously more important than others. Like in the Matrix franchise, it was obviously the movies. And the plot expands more or less with more or less canonical center and peripheral, more or less less important thing. And you can grasp the main storyline without having to read it all. I mean, you can just get it. I mean, everybody can understand the Star Wars world just by watching the movies. You don't need any additional elements. You can try to show off by saying that you have seen a very, very rare episode of a series, but who cares? I mean, it's not very important. And So I'm going to go a little bit further, faster, because I think it's going to be boring otherwise, but we need to have examples. So, and it's, well, I have time, still have time, okay. Much time. Okay, I have to relax a little bit. I'm too much into a conference form, and I'm like 30 minutes, they're going to cut me off. Okay, so here is the representation she gives with the example of the Star Wars movies. You see that there are only 6 movies, so you can date the article 2013. So, and basically there are overlapping elements, but you see that she puts video games, online games, fan fiction, novelization as elements that sometimes are more peripheral and maybe erased. Actually, it's interesting because you know that they were before the first movie of the saga Star Wars in 1978, I think, there was a novel that came out before the movie that you could read with the story and with the cover. That is very interesting because the moment when they drew the cover, they didn't know exactly how the characters would look like. So basically it's before the movie. And actually it was a way to prepare the people because he was freaking out. He didn't know if it would work. Everybody would say that this project would fail very in a lame way. So he was freaking out. So he had to prepare the fields for the movie by with the comic book and with the novelization that actually came out before the movie. But when the movie was a success, he took off the book because he didn't want to have people reading it anymore because it was not canonical anymore. So you see how you can actually use those elements just to prepare the field for the real center of the thing. Okay, I switched that. Maybe no. Maybe I should talk about a bit about Mathieu Le Tourneux, which he's also a very important scholar in France, working on seriality. He wrote a very important book 2 years ago or 3 years ago that is called Fiction à la chaîne, which means in French fictions in chains, but à la chaîne also means when you build something like in Ford model, you know, to build cars, you do it, and it's actually because he's very interested into the history of industrialization of culture and how the industrialization of culture promoted some kind of serial models, and it's very interesting, whatever. And here again, it says some media series prevail over others, producing hierarchical effects between central and peripheral works in the constitution of the world. This is a question of the canon. These hierarchies are not absolute, and they cannot impose either an order or a system of prescribed readings and secondary readings. In reality, there is generally no absolute chronological coherence in what might be called the archidiegesis, on the model of the architext, because he uses also another concept from Genet, very important in his book, which is called architext. It's kind of genre, but it's more an example of a model of narrative, if you want. Since from one medium to another, parallel storylines multiply, often with significant contradictions. So basically, I will keep from this idea. Again, see, it's a very nuanced position here. Basically, I could agree with the idea of a hierarchy, yet I think that maybe the archidiegesis, it's also, I forgot, I mean, there's archi, not archidiegesis. This archidiegesis may exist to some extent. There is an archidiegesis, and you can build it, and it's a coherent storyline that you can basically discuss. And actually, the contradictions, as they remain peripheral, that they are not that relevant for the discussion on the archidiegesis. So my point is to say that the archidiegesis exists. There is a coherent chronological archidiegesis. All divergence or superfluous material is mere paratext. And the last problem, paratext is supposed to sell rather than it tells. So I come back to that. My presentation is not well built, but too much text, but the idea of thinking about some elements of the story world in transmedia storytelling as paratext is also a way to remind us to their real function, which is not only to tell a story, but is also submitted to another function, which is to sell the franchise, or to sell the most profitable element of the franchise. And when you read it, Jenkins is very aware of that. When he talks about the functioning of transmedia storytelling, he talks about the economics of media consolidation, which is built on synergy. And say transmedia storytelling expand the potential market for a property by creating different points of entry for different audience segments. So basically, the idea is to for example, some people would respond more to little toys like Lego because they are younger and they need this segment because in 5-10 years, there will be teenagers, and those teenagers, they need to be hooked to the media franchise to see what is really important, the big movies, the big video games, maybe the new TV shows on Disney Plus. So basically, you see, here's the idea of segmentation of the audience. And so basically, it's a economical logic. And this dispersion of the story world is made in sort that no consumer knows everything. So basically, the idea that you need to know everything to understand the story world is completely absurd, because it is not the goal of the transmedia storytelling. The idea is to always keep some elements out of reach to maintain the interest for the story world. And so he describes the consumers as hunters and gatherers, moving back across a various narrative, trying to stitch together a coherent picture from the dispersed information. So there is this need of coherence, but actually it is more like trying to fill the gaps, but it's not very gaps that are threatening the coherence of the story world, because this coherence is, I think, guaranteed by the archidiogesis, the core of the story world, which everybody is supposed to know. So it is mandatory to read the 9 movies from or at least maybe you can forget the prequel, it was crap, but you need to see the 3 first movies of the Star Wars franchise in order to get it, because otherwise you're completely lost. And it is mandatory, and it's very coherent. It's very actually extremely even banal, stereotyped story world. It's a fairy tale. It was built on prop functions, narrative function. It's basically hyper coherent. You cannot do a story more coherent than that. And basically all the elements after that, okay, this is just additional material. And then the idea is to give this feeling that you can enter this thing, but even if you enter with the Lego Star Wars, this will drive you back to the core center at the moment. At some time, you will have to know this part of the story, and this is going to be very relevant, and everything would revolve around that. And I have a proof to that. I can prove it. It's because you can always say with those kind of saying when you have a presentation like that, you don't know, each consumer is different. How do you know? It's just your reading. Okay, it's not my reading, as I have elements that I will give you later, because I have forgotten that I have those kind of elements before. But also, don't forget that in transmedia storytelling, those elements I have played to this video game that looks very funny to you, maybe, but I'm old enough to have played hours and hours in those places that we used to call, you know, those places, not even on my art computer, because we would go to those places where you play and pay like 2 Swiss francs each game or whatever. So it was incredibly realistic, this video game, I have to say. There was 3D. You cannot imagine the feeling you had. You felt like really like Luke Skywalker in this, but whatever. I just showed that because I wanted to show that all those elements belong to the logic of the transmedia storytelling. At this time, they have absolutely no or very low degree of narrativity. So they are not really narratives. They are basically byproducts, but also elements that when you play, you build scenarios with your Lego in your bedroom. I mean, you are still participating to the story world, and they need that, this continuity. This is what they are building. But they are basically all paratexts. I mean, it's not seriously the element of the story world. So you cannot judge those elements as parts of the story world in terms of narrative elements that you would need to know in order to fully grasp the universe of Star Wars. Here is the novelization, which is not a novelization because it came out before the movie. So here is the example of the two things, and you see also the funny helmet of Darth Vader is a little bit ridiculous, or for example the kind of ridiculous also outfit of Luke Skywalker with his six-pack, which is very different from the actors they chose. But whatever, they already had the little robots, but they were still in production, so they didn't know how they would look like. So basically, they were working on.
I can tell you, Raphaël, I have a Portuguese version of this book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and the cover is very much like this one.
Yeah.
It's a very buffed version of Luke Skywalker.
Exactly, and here you see also on the left how the way the allusion to samurai movies is very obvious on the left. It is obvious in the Star Wars universe, but less obvious. And here you really see with the helmet of Darth Vader, and especially the kimono of Luke Skywalker, it's 100% a story of a samurai. It's whatever. So here you see, for example, after that, George Lucas, he didn't want the novel to be to belong to the story world, to be an official element of the story world. I think there's probably someone in the audience that would tell me, no, it's not true. The story is completely different. I'm happy to hear about that. Whatever. I'm just saying that it shows that those elements were basically advertisement, pure advertisement. I have another example of advertisement. I don't go to this, but okay, see, okay. I go a bit slow because I still have some time, but no, okay, I'll go a bit further. But the idea also is to show that in a paratext, some paratexts have some degree of narrativity. For example, I've read John Steinbeck at high school, and it was a good reading, I think. But for example, you just watch at the cover of a book like that, just paratext, but it already tells almost everything between the picture and the abstract on the right. Basically, you get a story here, and the way it prepares the field for the story. Basically, I see it, I remember everything about that. I mean, so it's just that you see that it's very different. It's very difficult to make the difference between paratext and some elements of a transmedia storytelling, because both of them, they have the same function, and both of them, they can carry some degrees of narrativity, some elements of a story world. In transmedia storytelling, they are not narratives at all. They are mere advertisement products. And others, they pay, I mean, to sell it just to have the people to get attention to their story world. And then, so basically you see here that we can basically drew the two schema that I gave before to show the way how you can put them closer together. Here on the left, paratext would be something that has a narrative in the center, and at the periphery, sometimes it's a little bit narrative, sometimes it's not so deprived of narrativity. And that's why I mentioned this article by Richard Sangelet in 2006. It's in the journal Prote. It talks about the narrativity of paratext, and I thought it was a very interesting article. And on the right, it would be the idea of a conception of transmedia storytelling that would give credit to the idea that there is an archidiegesis that exists, which is built around central narratives that are more important than other narratives and gives coherence and a certain form of continuity in the plot of the narrative in the core center of the transmedia storytelling. And then there are other elements that are revolving around it, just in the snowball, like in the snowball effect, that are peripheral layers of narratives that would revolve around it and would basically play a role that is quite similar to paratext. I mean, to prepare, keep in interest, continue to discuss, continue to, you know, build this form of activity, social activity around the main important part of the story world, where basically for industries lies the true benefits or the most important commercial value. So basically, the commercial value of the text could be the only elements that we should discuss and not about plot. But as plot might be related to it, you will see that I will come back to my idea of a plot with a very evident, striking example of how plot prevails on the continuity of the story world, actually. So some paratexts have a high degree of narrativity. Transmedia storytelling can be organized hierarchically. Some portions of the transmedia narrative are more central than others. Transmedia storytelling has a commercial function. It's not just as most paratexts. Some of those narratives are more than just a form of advertisement. Commercial paratexts are no more than just a form of advertisement. Commercial paratexts, a commercial product with no narrativity. I'll still wait for my examples. I don't know why I put so much text. I'm sorry. I think it's going to be too redundant if I read that. So basically, I come back to this, and this is a very striking example. This is actually the example why I started to think about this this talk or this argument. Basically, it happened with Interstellar. It was a movie that I have seen, like as many of you, I hope, because it's a very good movie, I think. Even if Alain Boya, my mentor in movie, says that it was crap for some reasons, but I think it was a good movie. Yet, I was very surprised with this story because I was on my cell phone, probably the same because it's very old. And one day I was reading this free newspaper you read on your phone. I guess it exists all around the world. It's called in Europe 20 minutes, 20 minutes. It's probably because it's time you take to read it. So basically, I was reading my free newspaper on my phone, and I found an article. It's called "The Lost Chapter of Interstellar," and I'm like, "What? There is a last chapter?" I've had already seen the movie, but you're like, "Okay," and you click on you touch your screen, and then it directs you directly on a website where basically you can read for free again a short comic book like this that is freely given to all the fans of the movies or of Christopher Nolan. You see that it is even written by Christopher Nolan. Wow. I mean, he took the time to make the storyline for this. It's very interesting also because it tells a very specific aspect of the plot. When you went to see the movie, spoiler alert, you can take off the sound for 2 minutes if you want. Spoiler alert, when you go to see the movie, there is this thing that is very funny, and it's also typically transmedia storytelling strategy. There's this moment where you see a guy that is lost on a frozen planet, and this guy is played by Matt Damon. And Matt Damon was not credited. Nobody knew. It was not in all the advertisement before the movie. Nobody said that Matt Damon would play in the movie. I mean, this is weird because you know that you pay a star to play in your movie, and it's so expensive because you wanted him or her to be actually a way to advertise your movie. So basically, you advertise the fact that it is the next movie by Matt Damon. But instead of doing that, they say, no, it's not Damon, nothing about him. And when you watch the movie, you're like, what? It's Matt Damon. And Matt Damon is a good guy. He always plays a good guy, okay? But in the movie, there is a this is spoiler alert, there is this kind of twist, and basically he's a bad guy, and he almost threatened to kill everybody, and then you're like, wow, you go out of the movie, and what you do? Yeah, fuck, you see, there was Matt Damon in the movie. No, seriously. And you go in social network on Facebook at the time, now I don't know, on Twitter or whatever, and then you share with your friends. That's Matt Damon. It's crazy. I mean, he's playing the bad guy, and basically the last chapter is about the backstory of the guy played by Matt Damon. And so basically, you see that all this part of the movie was really planned as a way to advertise a movie. You don't credit Matt Damon, you make him play a bad guy when you expect him to play a good guy. You know people are going to talk about that. Then you give the backstory in the form of a comic book, because you know that comic book is a media that fans like the most, because the Comic-Con, you know, it all came out from comics. Then you put it free so they can share it. So example, here is how you find it when you go on the website. There are the buttons, little buttons to share it, because it's done to share it. So basically, you click on whatever social network you prefer, and then you become an agent to make the promotion of the movie. And here is such a typical example of what truly is transmedia storytelling. This is the idea of how this element has no commercial value, because it's for free. It's done only to keep the interest, to make people talk, to make people make this activity, have the feeling that the story world is bigger and there are probably elements that are hidden and all that. But honestly, no one can say that this element is as important as a movie. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. So here you see how people work. It's exactly the same thing with Stranger Things. For example, and here I come back to the question of the plot. When you read the comic book, and there is this moment when 11, I don't know, is coming in the Upside Down, and here you have this guy that is lost in the Upside Down who sees her, and he sees her, but he doesn't recognize her because he's never met her before. We know who she is because we have seen the TV show, okay? So basically when he sees her, he says later, when he hears the story from his friends on the other side, he will better understand what it is he sees, you see, with the text. But trapped in the eeriness of the woods, he isn't sure if the apparition that stands before him is human. He's not sure if it's even really there. And you see here, if you read the comic book and you don't see the TV show, this page is simply incomprehensible. So basically, it would be like the idea of, okay, I need now to see the TV show to understand what happened here. But it is thematized, but it never happens in the TV show. You will never find in the TV show an element of the plot that you wouldn't be able to understand as an audience, that would need you to buy the comic book to understand it. So you see here the hierarchy is commercial, but it's also linked directly to the intelligibility or the coherence of the plot. On the left, the plot is incoherent if you don't have the TV show. On the right, the plot is completely coherent because you don't need to have the comic book to understand it. And I think all story worlds, they work that way because simply because the industry cannot take the risk to have some of the audience that haven't been a good gatherer or hunter-gatherer to be lost in the plot. They need them to have some intelligibility, and this intelligibility can be guaranteed only if the most important elements of the story world are given in a coherent way. You see, so we are not all geeks or fans. Geeks and fans are vectors of promotion. They're very important for the industry. So they give them those comic books and those kind of treats to reward them, but at the same time, they always have to think about the central core, the audience, the larger audience that have to be able to follow the storyline without being lost, without having to read the comic book or play a video game, even if video games before become as important as an industry for the culture of transmedia storytelling in terms of just profits. I think that they will never, never say never, but they will not in the close future become the center core of the archidioceses for the single reason that not everybody is able to play on a video game. Some games are only on PlayStation, some games are only on Xbox, and many people that are not able to play those video games. But everybody can see a movie. So basically, you cannot take the risk to lose 20, 30, 50, or 60% of your audience by making the core of the plot in the video games. You can make an adaptation, but as soon as you adapt the video game to the movies, the main audience will be made on the basis of the movies. It's a little bit different with the TV shows now. I think that but it's the same thing with the comic books. Not everybody is a reader of comic books. So today, I think it's quite obvious that there is a hierarchy, for example, that in Marvel Universe that is built on movies or maybe probably also TV shows. Now there is a battle on this ground. So basically, I wanted to mention very quickly Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I used to comment that without having seen any episode of Buffy until recently, where I found those archives given by Netflix, or I don't know, maybe Amazon Prime, I don't know. So I've seen the first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Okay, I will not comment, but it's not so bad, but whatever. And here is another example that is actually just interesting when, in terms of the media, that would be the core of the experience. I will finish very quickly. Is the fact that you can change the core of the experience for some reasons. And for example, when the TV show became not profitable enough, it was cancelled, as it happens very often with TV shows. But Joss Whedon, he said that, okay, maybe we can continue, but this time, instead of having just some peripheral comic books that he used to publish during the TV shows, he decided to make a graphic novel that is really thought as the continuity of the TV shows. And then he says season 8 of, or season, I don't remember, it's here, season 8, yes, of the series is continued in comics. And here you can switch from one logic to the other. But here it's very important, and they try to be very careful to have a real continuity in the plot, in the storyline. So you see here, actually, plot matters, and it changes completely when the comic book is not just a byproduct that is published during the TV series, and when it is considered as the season 8 of the series. And just the idea of having a numeration of the series shows that there is a continuity. See? Okay, Star Wars, and now I'll probably end with this example, but it's going to be very fast. But basically, I should quote my Anaïs Goudemont, who was my PhD student, and she took my attention to this. So there is an article you can read about that, very good article she wrote, but I'm not going to talk about that. Here is a long quotation. I will go a bit faster, but I don't want you to think that I steal the ideas from my PhD students, which she's not anymore. She's much more clever about franchise series and stuff like that, but whatever. Here is this diagram, probably full of approximation, but just to show you how important the plot is. When Disney bought the franchise, they wanted to make sequels to the original trilogy. And they wanted to give it to some very famous guy, J.J. Abrams. He wanted to have a full liberty, freedom to think about how he wanted to continue the story. There was just a little problem that there were like many products that existed already, which told what happens after the Return of the Jedi. And they wanted to start back to this point of the story just after the Return of the Jedi, or not exactly just after. There's some time gap because actors get old and everything, but whatever. The thing is, they said, okay, and they wanted to create this intense curiosity that would draw masses to the movies to see what is going to be the continuation. So to keep this interest, what they decided, they said, okay, let's say that the entire universe that counted thousands of byproducts and cross-reference and elements, all that doesn't exist anymore. We built a new world that is called Star Wars Legends. All the rest is called Expanded Universe. That used to be the old franchise. And then we decide what we keep in this new story world. And what did they keep? Well, all the 6 movies they already had, because they were very important, of course. They cannot change it. They cannot say that, I don't know, that Obi-Wan Kenobi is still alive. There are some things that inherited from this universe. Darth Vader is dead. Well, Palpatine, maybe we can take him back from the bed, living bed. But the thing is, why it's interesting? It is interesting because you see that basically to keep the interest in the plot, you can take the decision to destroy an entire transmedia story world with this supposed continuity, homogeneity, no center. That's not true. You keep just a center, just the archidioceses, and basically you erase the rest of it. Maybe you bring back the elements that you think are worth bringing back into this, but it's completely subordinated to the interest of the plot and the continuity of the plot. And it's very interesting, not only that, not only this decision that would make some elements of the story world not relevant anymore, to give more space to build, develop other elements, TV series, The Mandalorian, stuff like that. You erase it to make some room to build the elements of the story world. But then also, if you think about the reaction of the fans, which is you can call trolls, because some of them, some of the producers, they were like threatened to be killed by the fans because they were not happy with some developments of the sequel of the trilogy. It was not what they imagined. It was like, no, they cannot do that. This is a shame. Let's raise money to remake the episode 8 because it was crap. And they were like some people that were ready to do that. I mean, let's find $300 million just to make it back because it's crap. I mean, would they even bother if it was a crap comic book? Or if they didn't agree with even the scenario of a video game? If they are not happy with the video game, they don't play it. If they don't like the comic book, they don't read it. They can burn it if they want, but they're not going to be so pissed about that, because they truly understand that what really matters are those movies that are developing in a very coherent way. And when you add episode 8, there is no coming back from that. What the director, the importance of this element of the story world, it cannot be erased. They want so much to erase that because they know that they cannot change it, and that gives you a sense about the importance of the coherence, the importance of some elements of the story world that I call archidioceses, and the fact that all the rest is just like something that is not so relevant either for the producers, because they can erase it when they need more empty space to develop their story world, or for the fans, because they don't really bother about the change of the copyright and the fact that some of the elements, peripheral elements, have been declared as not belonging anymore to the story world of Star Wars. There were like no protestation about that. protestation were about the development of the plot in the movie 8 or 9. And you see, it's here where you see, like either for the, that's why I said it's not just me, it's either for the audience, for the fans, for the most engaged fan, and for the industry, there are clear hierarchies. And those hierarchies are built around the coherence of a plot. And that's it, basically. So I'm done here. Here you see, you see again, the main target of trolls and toxic fandom were basically about prequel and sequel, not about all the rest, because they don't bother. They're not going to buy it, buy those elements that revolve around the story world, but not that. Okay. Okay, just to for fun, here again, my godson, Piel, is a big player, video games player, so I cannot follow anymore. But he plays, he loves Battlefront, and great. And I'm like, I would like to be able to progress, but it takes too long, as I said, and I'm too old, and I cannot really play properly, so I cannot really get to the point. But I asked him to show me these elements that you find in Battlefront. This is a moment when on the planet Endor, I think, you see the Death Star bursting at the end of the Return of the Jedi, and I like very much this image. So it's cinematic. Just to remind you, this is for me also another good example. When you are in the video game, you can see elements of the movies, the explosion that happened in the movie. You can see the explosion of the Death Star or the Black Star, remember? But when you are in the movie, of course, you cannot see the elements played in the video game because they are subordinated to it. And even if today Battlefront makes as much money as a movie, almost, maybe not, but one day it will be the same or even more. Again, it cannot play this role of the elements that gives the coherence of the story world because of the happy few that can truly play it. And then because of that, if you would rely on the video game to understand the movie, too many people would be lost, you know, and this is a problem that they cannot do. So again, and you all know that the famous Crisis on Infinite Earths, this is a very common way in a franchise to keep the interest of the stories, because there is always a risk of saturation of story worlds. And when there is saturation, you cannot tell good stories because plots would be too complicated or déjà vu or whatever. You want to have a restart. What you do, you make the world explode and then you start again, fresh, new. And this shows again how the quality, the interest of the plot is more important than story world. You destroy story world for keeping the interest of the plot and not the opposite. Okay? Okay, and this is the advertisement. So usually when you see again my books, this means that the talk is over. So usually
it's the paratext
during the entire talk, but I will stop sharing. Okay. So
Raphaël,
more or less an hour.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah, but it was fantastic. Truly dense. Lots of questions. I've filled the 3 or 4 pages with annotations and questions. But anyway, as I told before, we can have a short break, 5 minutes at most, for our needs, so to speak, and we come back to the discussion. Okay. All right. We'll see in 5.
Benjamin? Benjamin?
Okay, we are.
I will have to leave around 8:15. Do you think it's going to be all right?
That's all right. It's in 20 minutes, you say?
No, it's now it's no at 8:15.
Oh, 15 past 8.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
okay. So we have at least 40 minutes, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
For talking. Yes, certainly.
Okay, good. Because it's quite late, and then okay.
No, of course. No problem at all. I have some. Well, anyway, let me see if as soon as people come back. Oh, Grace is back.
You've seen that I have my book translated in Chinese.
Yes, I've seen that. I've seen that in your academia profile.
So
yes, in Mandarin.
Yeah.
It's truly great. But are you in any sort of negotiations for an English version of it?
No, that's sometimes I don't know if it would be as relevant as it is in French. For some reason, there are more works, I think, in English on narrative interest, on narrative tension, or suspense. So sometimes I don't know if it would be as relevant, but maybe one day, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm currently translating myself my last book because it's short, so I use detail and I can basically manage to do it.
You mean the Le Rouage de l'Intrigue?
Because I
love it. It's really great.
Yeah, but the next one will be great. You will see. It will be a revolution. The new figure 3 for the 21st century, at least.
Very good. Anyway, I see here that lots of people have already come back, and I have someone who is willing to make. Well, anyway, I have some notes here, but in order to put things in motion, I will ask Vanderlei to make his question. I will put the yes in the mode of. Okay, Vanderlei, you can open your audio if you want, and video too. Are you there? Where is he? Oh, he fell. Strange.
Yes, but maybe he didn't. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I don't hear you.
Yeah, he broke up. Anyway, if no one has.
Okay, well, whatever.
Are you there?
Yeah, he's there. Wanderlei? Yes, no. I see him. He's raising hands.
Yeah, so open your audio, open your sound. Let me check if you're there.
Yeah, because we don't hear you.
Vanderlei, we don't hear you.
Technical
let me see. Yeah, you're still mute.
Oh, I can read it.
Okay, you open. Now you're there. Please talk. No, we're not listening.
We don't hear it.
Do you have earphones or something? Okay.
Or you can write your question. I can read it.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Okay, so he will try to get around the problem. I have a particular, yes, as I was listening to you, Raphaël, I felt really sorry that, for instance, Vanderlei, when you're ready, you just open your sound and talk something. If we hear, we will know that you're on, okay?
Or you can write your question.
Or you can write down your question. Okay, so I felt really sorry that, for instance, someone like João Sena isn't here, because you were even mentioning that you were not going to talk about Marvel Cinematic Universe because it's his field of expertise. In a way, he wrote a PhD thesis about it.
I was relieved that he was not there to be honest.
Yes, I wrote to him. I sent a WhatsApp to him, and he said he was sorry too, because he has other appointments at the same time.
Can you hear me now? Sorry to disrupt.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, Vanderlei.
Okay.
Let's enjoy that you are technically available. So make a question.
I'm really sorry about the delay and the problem. First, I'd like to congratulate Professor Raphaël. It was very good presentation. I liked it very much. And my question actually has got to do with something you said in the beginning. You talked about that paratexts are meant to tell rather than tell. And it actually, I don't think this is even a question, it's more commentary. It reminded me of a Mel Brooks film called Spaceballs. I don't know if everybody saw this film.
Yes.
And there's a moment in Spaceballs when they find Master Yoda, but in the film he's named Yogurt. Yeah. And then they ask him, but Yogurt, Master Yogurt, what are you doing here? And he says, merchandising. And then what? But what? And then he starts showing the toys and the T-shirts and everything. And the moment you said that, it reminded me of that scene. So yes, I think that paratexts and I would say Star Wars nowadays in the modern world is probably at least the largest of the universe, the largest universe in terms of paratexts, in terms of telling. So that quotation of yours reminded me very much of that joke that Mel Brooks told.
It reminds me of two other examples. One is quite old, and it's in Watchmen. The superhero is commercializing his own action figures. You know, the bad good guy. I don't know if it's bad a good.
Yes.
And actually, I'm currently watching The Boys, and it's fantastic TV shows, fantastic TV show, one of the most clever TV shows I've seen for decades. And then really, it's all about this vote company that is basically merchandising them like high products, and that's a fantastic, very relevant politically and for all in all aspects. I advise you warmly to go watch that.
I'd like to jump on that question.
But if I could just make it one quick question.
Sure.
Yes, please go on.
It would be, do paratexts only sell? Can they be meant to sell as well, or not?
Can I jump on that? That question, because I think it's complementary to something that I've been writing down as you were mentioning, this kind of opposition, selling, telling, because I think that in our field, in media studies mainly, it happens a lot, a kind of indifferentiation, a kind of merging of the in terms of textual approaches to this sort of phenomenon, a kind of merging altogether of rhetorical approaches to cultural consumption, because I think that that's what's at stake. The textual dimension, the textual construction, in order to associate narrative universes which belong to different platforms, seems to me more connected to a rhetorics of cultural consumption than the problem, your problem that you bring here, which is the architectural dimension of narrative comprehension, which involves a poetics of narrative discourse, properly speaking. So I think that this distinction, selling, telling, seems to me to mark an important frontier, an important boundary between rhetorics and poetics in a certain sense, don't you think?
Well, as you said, there is I think it merges, and for me it was this opposition by no means was to come back to the opposition between art and money that has been so important to structure the field of cultural products for 2 centuries. And now basically we are out of that. We all know that we don't really think about it, and again, there's absolutely no judgment about the quality of the product that you can build. I mean, there are products that are made to sell, probably. I mean, not only sell themselves, but to sell other products. But they can be more interesting than the product that they are selling, culturally speaking. There is no doubt about that. I think that I don't know when you see sometimes that I've seen some TV shows from the Marvel universe that were better than any movies that I've seen, or sometimes Rogue One, maybe for fans of Star Wars, probably is a better movie of the Star Wars franchise, and probably it was made just to have the people wait between 2 installments of the franchise. Not only, of course, because it was a big movie, a very expensive movie, but yet you see sometimes they can take more risks because they are looking for a smaller audience, and then they can make something better because of that. So basically, for sure, I think that it's telling and selling at the same time most of the time. And the question is it to sell something else? I mean, are you a promotional artifacts for some other artifacts? And maybe that gives you an idea of the importance of the artifact in the franchise. But yeah, of course, it's not to say there is nothing to do with aesthetical quality. And I agree with Benjamin. I'm here completely in a reflection on rhetorical approach of the story world. But at the same time, that's what I find so interesting when you work on seriality. You can never stop thinking about the commercial issues that sometimes you bracket so easily when you talk about a great novel like Flaubert, or I don't know, but because Flaubert, you know, this is the model of the artist. He has a wealthy family and doesn't have, or he's an artist that agrees to die very poor and very sick. But I mean, this idea, this romantic idea of the artist is completely ridiculous. And at the same time, with series, we always think about the interconnection between the two. Sometimes it gives great products, like maybe for the boys, it's just the best relevant TV shows I've seen for a long time. But the idea was maybe basically probably to say, okay, let's do a superhero story, but reverse all the elements, and this transgression will bring fresh. Will be fresh and renew the public for that. And actually, the first time my girlfriend, she wants to see a TV show with superheroes, that she had to overcome the problematics of having superheroes and then discovered it was just great. So whatever. I think that Grace wanted to say something. That
yes, there is a lot of people here lining up for making questions. They were a little shy at the beginning, but now they are leaving the box. And we have here Marcel Vieira has a question for you. Marcel, please come in.
Hi, Benjamin. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I would like also to congratulate the presentation. It was very good, and it connected with the questions and issues that Benjamin was interested in this seminar. I think was really great to be here. And my question is about this distinction between central and periphery. Center and periphery. Because when we watch at your examples, we see central and peripheral medias most than central and peripheral plots. Do you think it's possible to study transmedia narrative, looking for how plots, central and peripheral plots, can travel through medias rather than a hierarchy between a central media and the peripheral medias?
Yeah, I think it all depends. The problem, the limitation to this possibility that would probably be the idea of a transmedia or real transmedia form of storytelling is the fact that you have to rely on the idea that your audience is able to access to those two media, is used to it, likes the two media, because many people, you can segment also the population with the kind of media they favor. And there are some, and I think that's why it looks a little bit conservative to say that movie theater, movies, film are so central in those story world, because you think like, okay, this is like a 20th century, we are 21st century. Now it's not the case anymore. We all see that with the crisis we have now, cinemas are closed. Now we are switching to something else. We go to movies, home movies and series. But at the same time, it's very difficult to find a media that would be able to be as wide as keeping like everybody together. Some people, they say, I don't like series because it's too long, I'm bored. There are some people that resist to it. And so much that actually Netflix had to come back with normal movies, normal length movies. They had to produce those kind of films that people have to have the nostalgia. My girlfriend, she's like, okay, I want to see a real movie tonight, not a series, not only a series. I'm like, okay. But see, so basically there is something about that media that still resists, not for long probably, but still is there. It's very difficult if you ask from your audience the ability to switch from one media to another one. You have to think about an audience that is most familiar with two media, and it's not the case of a lot of people. You diminish the possibility of spreading your story world, for example, comic books. Very few people truly like storybooks, comic books. to be honest. So you cannot rely on comic books. You cannot rely on video games because it's too complicated, too many platforms, too many skills to be able to progress. And okay, so it would be basically TV and movies, which would be quite universal. But at the same time, again, I think that's it's a little bit difficult. I think that sometimes there is an autonomy that I called it coagulation. There are some local coagulation of new archidioceses. For example, I think that on TV, The Mandalorian, or I don't know, some Marvel stories, or like Watchmen, the new Watchmen, the continuation of Watchmen on HBO is fantastic. And when you see it, it's a work on its own, much closer to the comic book actually than the movie. And then when you see it, you see, okay, this could be a new start, another center. I think you can see the TV series without having read the comic book. But here would be a good example. For example, the HBO TV shows and the comic book by Gibbons, Moore Gibbons, would be one of those examples you give, for example, because it's really in perfect continuity with a comic book, not with a movie. But here, I think it's still a pleasure for the happy few. And they made it possible, I think, for people that haven't read the comic book, possible to watch the HBO TV show without having read the comic book. So, see, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not possible to see the TV show without reading. But it could be. We would test it. But I think that those kind of issues, the producers have to talk about it and they think about it right from the beginning of the conceptualization. To reward the fans that would recognize the clothes of the soups and see that they are closer to the comic book. This is a reward for people who read the comic book. But truth is, I think it's just too much risk commercially.
We have Grace here who wants to make a question. Please, Grace.
Yes, just quick comments. First, thanks for this always refreshing way of thinking of transmedia, and it's very nuanced, very careful. I like that. And your idea of levels of narrativity and of hierarchy, I think it's very interesting to think about this problem without falling into some traps. But I'd like to discuss a little bit about genre. Most of the examples that you bring are very heavy plotted. For example, Nolan, and I have to agree with Alain Boyard here, Stranger Things and Star Wars, they are, of course, very illustrative to the idea that you are bringing. And of course, what interests me here is, I was wondering what happens in these story worlds or in this series that are a bit less based in plot, are very not, the narrativity is not very strong. I'm thinking here about things like Mad Men or building stories, Chris, where there are a lot of products that are out of it, or even documentary narratives. I think Valeria talked about them in the courses before, so I'd like to hear your take on these kinds of narratives, how this idea of transmedia storytelling that's not exclusive of fiction could also work in these less strong plot-based scenarios. Don't you think that maybe, I'm thinking that the recognition and the familiarity with that world would have maybe an importance here more than the pieces and bits that are missing from the information? I don't know. I'd like to hear you developing on that.
It's very complicated. I don't know if I can answer this question. It's too complicated. I think you mentioned building stories, so I'm a big fan of Chris Ware, so I like to talk about it, but it's not a transmedia story world. I've been very interested in looking at the last book of Chris Ware, which is an autobiography. It's a huge book. The weight is probably 20 kilos, or I don't know. And then when you read it, you see that he built actually a lot of elements. He thinks about his world in a very transmedia way, because he builds elements in 3D. You know, sometimes there's an invitation to build those elements. And actually, I thought it was a joke, but actually he does it. And you see, he built a lot of products that are related to his world. And then, yeah, and then here the idea is completely different. But you see, even in Jenkins, the idea of transmedia storytelling is very based on plot, because this idea of being a hunter-gatherer to get all the pieces of information to make sense of, I mean, this is thing that you shouldn't bother if you talk about low narrativity forms of narratives, because the idea is more to explore. It's more like a map. It's more like a spatial way to explore. A little bit like in a video game when you have, you know, the map that is lightening as you progress in the world. And I think, yeah, it's probably possible. In documentary, it would be very interesting to see how you could manage to do something like that. But it's tough to say. I think the concept, maybe we should just keep the concept, because the concept was developed for some sort of fiction that I think was heavy plotted, actually. And it's a paradox in some ways, because it's supposed to be to put plot in the background, yet all the examples are built on super heavy plotted elements. So basically, transmedia storytelling, the ideal form of transmedia storytelling, would work better probably with less plotted forms of storytelling. And then that maybe it's possible, because then the problem of losing the center or the periphery would make much more sense, probably.
Yeah. Since Raphaël, you told me that you have a limited scope of time to stay with us, we have one last question here coming from Rodrigo, and it's interesting because Rodrigo is someone. Are you listening to me? Are you?
Yeah, I just said that maybe I can take 2 questions if I'm very short.
No, it's a long question, in fact. So I think we could stay with that and then wrap things up. Which is a shame, obviously, which is a shame, because we'd love to stay talking to you, discussing things. But anyway, in the case of Rodrigo, it's funny because he is someone who recently presented his PhD thesis on transmedia storytelling. So, but he has problems with his audio. So I'll just read the question that he wrote in the chat.
I have it. I just read it. It's just there.
Okay, there you go. I'm just saying it. Thank you for the talk, Raphaël. I really enjoyed it in terms of production. So the question is, in terms of production of films or TV shows, when is the ideal moment to develop transmedia storytelling? In the creation room or during the marketing phase? I ask because of the dual nature of transmedia paratexts, when they have both functions of commercial promotion and story narration. Also, what's your take on the abilities the professionals need to have in order to make the transmedia storytelling? Writing, producing, directing, marketing, advertising. I think it's a very interesting question because it really sums up things that we started discussing here in this round of conversation.
So thank you, Rodrigo. It's very, very nice, interesting question. Nice comment. So thank you. To be honest, here I have to be modest and humble, and I have just no idea because I don't know. I'm not a producer, so I really see it from the side of the analyst, the narratologist. The narratologist doesn't. Even though narratology has always have been in this in between this matrix of possibilities for creating narratives and at the same time a toolbox to analyze actual stories. The thing is, I don't know. those kind of things are, Jenkins is more interested because he's more or less a sociologist more than he's not a narratologist at all. I mean, he's a sociologist. So those kind of things you really have to talk to the professionals and listen to what they have to say and see how what works. And for example, the case of Christopher Nolan would be extremely interesting to just document, ask him, and you know how it works. Some of those industries, they are extremely opaque. Would you say that in English? They really don't want to show their secrets because
yes,
when it's working, everybody wants to do the same, but they don't want you to do the same. So basically, they have some good reasons for hiding the way it works. But here again, so I can just say what common sense would say. I have the feeling that, for example, the concept in the case of Christopher Nolan, I didn't know if it was even relevant. When I see the numbers, for example, of shares on Facebook, I think it's very poor. So basically, I was like, maybe they did all that and didn't work, and you don't know. And sometimes when they have strategies that don't work, they don't say it because they're ashamed and it's not good. I mean, you have to show success to have success. So basically, you just don't know. So this is another reason probably why we don't know much about that. So I think we should be very aware of méfiant, not to take it for granted that storytelling, transmedia storytelling is a fantastic thing, not for sure. And also how they do it, we don't know much, but I think it's more like, it looks, for me, it looks like a creative room. It has to involve probably the creator of the object with some members of the marketing team, discuss and say, what do you want to do with, in terms of transmedia storytelling with your movie, what we could do. Fans, the geeks, they like comic books, we could make a comic book. Okay. That's interesting. Maybe we should find a backstory. Okay, I have this backstory that would be interesting. And basically, you look how it works. So basically, you're like, yeah, that would be cool. Maybe we could do something with Matt Damon. It would be fun if we hide his name and stuff. And who knows? Who knows? This is just like guessing. So I have no advice. I'm sorry. I think it's a different job to give you advice to do that. But it's always interesting to look at what people did and what seems to work and what doesn't work. For example, I think that the video games from the Matrix franchise didn't work at all. I mean, they did it, but it didn't work. Nobody paid it. The only thing I read is bad comments about the quality of the video game. So basically, probably it was a total failure. Yet Matrix franchise, people still talk about it.
Well, yeah. So we have the time. I wouldn't like to say goodbye to all and wrap things up without firstly just making a little remark about an interesting phenomenon that happened today here, which is, in fact, there is this. I think it's something to be written about. Maybe me and Raphaël should work on it because we belong to different fields of study, to different academic fields. Raphaël working in literary studies, me working in media studies, communication, because there is this strange feeling of the green of the neighbor, the green grass of the neighbor, because whereas Raphaël is a little skeptical, it seems to be a little skeptical, or maybe too familiarized with the powers of storytelling and saying maybe there is something on the other side of the boundary that could be enlightening in order to approach this phenomenon of transmedia or transmediality or transmedia storytelling. Whereas on the other side, for instance, me and maybe during this seminar, we discussed it a lot. There was especially one afternoon in which me, Christian, and Tatiana, we were discussing about transmedia practices and transmedia storytelling in media practices. And the conclusion, in a way, was that transmedia storytelling or transmedia narratology is basically narratology, is basically the tools of narratology. So we have in media studies, or some of us at least, have this kind of enchantment with the powers or the possibilities of narratology instrumentals to deal with transmedia. And somehow we still have to find the proper vocabulary in order not to put one thing too much on the center in despite of the other dimensions. So I think that's the kind. And one point that Raphaël mentioned, which is the fact, for instance, in answering Rodrigo, the fact that, for instance, this dimension of transmedia as a part of rhetoric of consumption is something that is very central to us in communication studies. But I think that there is something concerning the narratological aspects or dimensions of it that are still to be addressed. And I think that it's a very important and challenging field for us to discuss. For instance, in October, I would love to discuss some of these things in Lausanne during the Synergy event, okay? So I'd like to, I'm very sorry that we have to finish this way, but anyway, it was totally fantastic dance. It was exactly, I wouldn't say it wasn't exactly what I expected, because I expected this much of this encounter. So it matched entirely. And I would not like to finish it without first and foremost thanking for everyone who was present here, and thanking especially for those who helped me to develop this seminar. It was a very important, I think, a very meaningful encounter for us. We normally do not make this sort of encounters. I'm happy to have been able to promote it, and especially in the presence of Raphaël and Mireille, who really made it more shiny for us, and hope that we can reproduce this other times and in other moments. Raphaël, you have something to say?
I'm going to say goodbye because my girlfriend, she was really...
Yeah. No, we don't want to interrupt that.
But no, so thank you very much. And really now the only good thing with this stupid pandemics is the fact that we got used to make a conference on Zoom. And it helped me, it makes it much easier to cross the ocean, even though I always prefer to visit in Rio, but whatever, I'm very happy about that, and I hope we can do it again once.
We'll think about that, certainly. As long as we're through that, certainly we have to repeat that experience that you had with us. And so people, thank you very much. If anyone wants to stay after the transmission for a last photo, please stay. I'll just finish the transmission, and then we can talk a little and release Raphaël. Okay?
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.